Welcome to the Nice Girls Wear Scrubs podcast. I'm Allie,
I'm Cindy.
and we are a mother-daughter nursing duo on a mission to change the nursing narrative and unsubscribe to the typical mean girls club. Scorpios by astrology and nurses by choice, we want to share stories, create community, and give you actionable items to love your nursing career again. So let's jump into the episode. We have a special guest for Nurses Week. Her name is Chrisy.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to hear about your nursing journey and kind of the different things you've done in nursing.
Okay.
So one of the things I've talked about before is camp nursing, and it's something that actually Chrisy got me into. So she's going to tell us a little bit about herself. So what got you into nursing to begin with?
Well, first of all, I've been a nurse for probably a little over 6 years, almost 7 years now. Majority of my time has been working in pediatrics. And then just recently, in the beginning of the year, I switched to a more procedural nurse role working with adults. So that's kind of where I'm at now. I've done very many different specialties within pediatrics though before then. And yeah, so we can go a little bit more into kind of my role now later, but yeah.
And
Awesome.
when was the first year you did camp nursing?
So first year I did camp nursing was in 2020 when COVID started. So it was kind of a very interesting introduction to camp nursing for me because it wasn't, how it is now. And so it's evolved definitely from going from COVID into more normal camp nurse life. And now that the kids aren't on, precautions and things like that. So.
Oh, wow. So entering into it during COVID, did they do things like testing prior to them coming to camp? And were there certain things that you did while you were at camp to make sure that, everybody was safe? That sounds kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, definitely. So since it was my first year at that camp or in camp nursing in general, I wasn't the one to kind of manage all of the healthcare tasks really at camp until the following year where I became the health center director or the health center administrator is what they call it. It was a lot of mitigation to prevent COVID coming into camp. So we did a lot of testing beforehand where, the parents would manage that before coming to camp and they had to prove their negative testing. And then throughout camp, the camp and the directors kind of came up with certain safety measures and cleanliness and things like that, taking more hand washing breaks and just really cleaning the cabins, wearing masks, which was actually harder for staff to do than the actual children to do, which was really interesting. But yeah, so we did a lot to prevent COVID coming into camp and to keep it, still a fun environment at the same time.
Yeah. Awesome. So what made you get into camp nursing? Like that's just not like you don't hear about, I'm a nurse and I do camp nursing. So what would you say was the reason you did it? And also like how did you find out about it? How did you get interested in it?
Yeah. So I'm probably the most outdoorsy friend you'll have. I love the outdoors so much. And it's just become such a big part of my lifestyle. And I've known about camp nursing. It was just not something that I could feasibly do at the time when I originally heard about it. But in 2020, there was a post from the health center director at a summer camp. They posted on Triangle Area Nurses, which we'll maybe get to in a little bit, a community that I founded. She posted this on the Facebook site about needing a nurse for that camp. And I was like, you know what, like actually now is a really good time. I'm in the float pool, which gave me a lot of flexibility in my schedule. And so I ended up committing to working a week that summer for that camp specifically. But in general, the reason why I was so attracted to it is because it combines my love for kids and pediatrics, my love for being outdoors, and then just like nursing in rural environments, or like more environments where there's little resources. And I think that as a nurse working in that type of environment is something I love doing, because I'm also very creative, and like you can just come up with things on how to take care of, you know, patients or kids or staff members in an environment where you don't have the resources, you know, at the tip of your fingertips like you would in a hospital setting.
Oh, awesome.
And we went and did camp nursing together in 2021.
Yep.
And that was really fun. I am outdoorsy, but not as outdoorsy as you. I don't really like ticks or snakes or anything like that, but I survived and I did a great job.
You were awesome.
I was very tired and I ended up getting very sick afterwards.
Yeah.
Because you're don't sleep very much because you're really the only nurses on, like, and you don't pick somebody to be on call. You just kind of like, you know, you kind of take turns, but it's just kind of whoever wakes up too. And we had two nurses and a physician, and then you when we were there.
Yeah.
And
we
so
typically you were lucky.
Yeah.
We had that week, we ended up having a physician that week, so it worked out really well.
But I thought it was definitely a very interesting experience and very fun, and we did so many fun things. And so I think we got to go on hikes, and I think there were times where it was a really weird week too, because didn't they have like somebody coming in, so we like didn't get to do as many of the experiences that
so that week was I think it was the state or the health department coming in to inspect the camp. And so it was a little bit stressful because we had to kind of you know, do our best.
And we did like mock drills and stuff like that.
We did like a mock drill with the lifeguards, and it was quite an interesting week, but you rolled with the punches and you did such a good job. And I think my favorite memory was when we got a call that there was like over 20 campers who got stung by yellow jackets because they were playing a camp-wide game. And I guess just one kid ended up stepping in a yellow jacket's nest, and it just went everywhere. And I remember we grabbed the wasp like spray and we jumped into the golf cart and like, you know, sped to the field.
Let me drive the golf cart.
I would not like
it. I drove too slow.
I was like, we gotta get there. And so when we got there, it was like kind of like a mass casualty moment, it felt like, because so many kids were stung at once. But she had a bottle of spray and I had a bottle of spray, and we're like
who got stung? Who got stung? Come here.
Yeah, we were like, okay, if you're allergic, you know, stand on this side. If you're not, stand on this side. And we got lucky. The only one who was allergic to insect bites or bees and wasps in general was a counselor. And he just knew exactly what to do and kind of has gone through this before. So he was well taken care of, but we wanted to make sure that everyone else was okay. But that was my favorite memory, I think, out of that entire summer, because it felt like so dramatic. But then like, because the kids were also like so invested and like, so scared. And
they're like, there they are, there's more.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it was a good bonding moment, definitely.
So basically you were at a regular camp for kids, not necessarily like a illness specific camp. It was just a general population kids camp.
Yeah. So actually I've never worked at a special needs or a more medically fragile children's camp. I have not. So I can't speak to that. And I give those nurses props, because I can only imagine how much more work it would be to deal with that day to day at camp. But so all of the camps that I've been at have been more you know, most of our kids are healthy. We have the occasional, you know, diabetic or POTS or things like that. But typically these camps try to, you know, have pretty healthy kids because that's just what they're mostly equipped for. So
yeah. But if you had a child and you wanted your child to go to that camp, they could have, like, obviously not severely need medical, but to say they had diabetes or something else, then you would help monitor some of that while they're away from home.
definitely. Yes. Yeah.
We
And
gave a
so,
lot of meds. We like rode around the golf
Mhm.
cart every morning and at nighttime, and we gave like our morning meds or nighttime meds.
yeah, morning, lunch, dinner, and
Yep.
bedtime were our med
Awesome.
pastimes or
Okay,
our med
cool.
pastimes. But yeah, so yeah, so and kids, with more of the chronic illnesses, that takes more of a discussion prior to coming to camp, just to
Mm.
make sure that they're a good fit for camp and that we would be able to handle their illness. But yeah, it's worked out. So
That's cool. All right. What was one of your best, aside from that one, experiences at camp that maybe not so dramatic, but like one memory or something that you're like, this is why I do it. This was really unique or like memorable, like maybe how you impacted a kid's life or something like that.
yeah. Okay, so I have two that I can like think of off the top of my head. One is actually not with a camper, it was with a staff member who was just going through a lot of mental health challenges that summer, was very overwhelmed. It was like their first summer at camp, or first summer being a counselor. And I was just really able to create a connection with them, and was able to guide them into kind of getting the mental health care that they needed outside of camp. And was there to just listen whenever I was available. And I think, being a camp nurse, we think a lot about the kids, but the staff members, I mean, they are on 24/7 the entire summer, and they have so much stress and responsibility. And so, we can't forget about them either. We have to be their caregivers as well. And so just, in general, this one specific instance was very memorable, because I remember at the end of camp, them like, coming up to me and hugging me. And we just like the longest hug, because you can tell how appreciative they were for me. So it was great.
That's
And then
awesome.
the second one, this was a different camp. This was 2 summers ago at this point. Um, this little kid, it was his first time at camp, and his dad had been a camper at that camp when he was
Oh,
young.
wow.
And so it was like, the next generation going to camp. And so he was so excited to be there. But he wasn't particularly the best kind of person to do activities, or he wasn't very sporty.
Yeah.
So he definitely didn't like the more sport oriented activities, but he loved nature and hiking, and like that was, I already made a connection with him with that, because I'm the same way. And so he unfortunately just got really sick like the
Oh,
first couple of days of camp, and it was like the worst start to his camp like experience. And I felt so bad for him, so he did have to stay in our health center for a couple of days when he was vomiting. And when he when that happens, we try to remove the child from the other campers so they don't get sick.
yeah.
And so he spent a couple of days in our health center, but throughout those days, him and I just developed such a great connection. And he's a first time camper. So that, I want to say he was 7 or 8. He was young. And, but this kid knew everything you would need to know, like more than you would need to know about plants. And so
Oh, wow.
the only way that we would like I would allow him to leave the health center was that he had to like stay within like the perimeter of the health center and not go anywhere further. But luckily at this camp, there's so many beautiful plants around the health center. And so he would take me around and like point to every plant and can tell me the scientific name of the plant. And and it was just so cute and wholesome. And you can tell that like even though, he had a really crappy start to his camp experience, we still made it the best we could. And we were able, I was able to connect with him in a different way and get him out of the health center. But my favorite part, sorry, I'm getting there, is he found a moth with a broken wing around the health center. And
Aw.
I was tending to another kid, so I was inside and I was watching him, keeping my eye on him outside. And when he I saw him pick up this thing and I was like, oh boy, like, what is it now? And he runs in the health center and like with the most serious look on his face and was like, do you, how small are the crutches do you have? Like, what are the smallest size crutches? Because this moth needs crutches. He needs to be able to fly. Like he has a broken wing. And like just in all seriousness. And I was like, I'm trying to keep a straight face. And I was like, well, you know, like, how am I going to tell this kid that we can't really save this moth? But you know, the moth was dead. And so what we did, it was a great learning opportunity, and we talked about the cycle of life and death and you know, all of that. And we did a little ceremony for the moth that we buried it outside the health center next to his favorite plant that he saw out there. And so it was just the sweetest, most wholesome experience. And like till this day, I saw him again the next summer. He tells everyone about that experience. Like I tell everyone about that experience, and he tells everyone about that experience. And that tells me that, you know, I made an impact on him. And although he's had a crappy start to camp, he was still able to have a good time despite that. So, and then when he was free from the health center, it was like a big deal. You know, he graduated outside the health center. So anyway, that was a long story, but that was my most memorable time at camp.
So when you're at camp, like when you go to be the camp nurse, not the director, but say I or somebody else wanted to do camp nursing, what would be like your day to day when you have to do it? Like, are you on 24/7? Not if you're not the director. If you're not the director and you just were one of the staff there, what would your day look like?
Yeah, so my day to day, well, typically most camps would kind of create, or the director will kind of create a schedule for the nurse. Well, time off at least. So like usually if you're, let's say you're there for a week, you usually have like 1 half day off that week, and then maybe like, you know, like a lunch or a meal to yourself or whatever. And then usually you'll alternate your on-call times. So for example, you know, when Allie and I were camp nursing together, we would try to alternate our time off at night or our on-call time. So that way, you know, the person who was not on call would be able to sleep, you know, most of the night unless you needed my help or whatever. And in that case, you know, then if someone were to come in overnight, then she would kind of take care of that without having to wake the other nurse up. So our day to day though, so we would start with morning meds. We would pass those out usually during breakfast. And then between breakfast and lunch, it's kind of, you know, we're back at the health center. We're preparing for like a lot of our camps have the kids go outside of camp for trips and other outings. And so we're preparing first aid kits and getting those meds together for the kids who will be taking meds outside of camp. Yeah. And then from, you know, lunch to dinner, or then we give lunch meds at lunch. Then from lunch to dinner, it's kind of the same thing. You know, we're prepping for nighttime meds, we're prepping, and not only that, it starts getting busy because kids are out doing their activities and they're getting hurt and they're coming, you know, for our help. So you're dealing with kind of like the health center logistics plus taking care of kids. So you have to kind of manage your time well. And then from dinner to bedtime, same thing, we give dinner meds, and then at the end of the day, we'll give bedtime meds. So a lot of it is structured around med times with care in between. So
somebody has to be available at the health center, like if somebody gets sick or gets hurt or something, right? So it's not like you could just deliver meds and then you go play the rest of the time.
Well, so most camps, depending if we don't have a child currently staying in the health center, well, if we do, that means that obviously a nurse always has to be present there. If we don't have any health center residents at the time, we usually like leave a note on the door or something saying that, you know, to either radio us, we have walkie-talkies, so they can either radio us for help or, you know, can wait till we get back. But that's the beauty of it. It's kind of like you do have a lot of downtime. But then there's some days that are so chaotic, super busy, and you don't have downtime. But the days you do have downtime, like I'm walking around camp, you can take, you know, depending on how the camp is set up and how close things are to the health center. You can go for a hike, you can walk around the lake, you could, the camp I'm working at this summer and that I've worked the last 2 summers, they have a bouldering climbing cave is
cool.
what they call
Yeah.
it, underneath the gym. And so like, you know, I'll go and climb during my time off, or I'll like bike around the property. So yeah, you can totally, yeah, it's flexible. You just have to make sure that you're available. And
Available.
with that, I typically like, I'm always prepared. So I'll bring my own like first aid kit and keep that with me in case I needed to go from whatever activity I was doing to, you know, taking care
Oh,
of
okay.
them. So
Oh, that's awesome. Then do you ever, you said that some kids go on, like, I guess be like field trip or off the campsite. Does a nurse go with them?
so typically no. So most of the camps I've worked for, almost all of the counselors are usually required to be at least minimum first aid and CPR certified. The camp that I worked for the past 3 years now, their counselors are required to have their wilderness first aid. And so, and we'll get there if we talk about certifications and stuff for camp nursing, but wilderness first aid is just the basic like first aid, basic medical care you can have basically for any layman's person who doesn't know anything about medicine. So yeah, it's
Okay, so they kind of know. And then you said they need to have CPR too.
yep.
Okay, so, all right, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you said about
Mhm.
it. Let's ask about that. Do you have to have special certifications to be a camp nurse?
So there aren't like a particular certification, but I always recommend for any nurse to at least have that wilderness first aid at the very minimum, because that wilderness first aid teaches you, again, how to use limited resources, how to care for a patient or, you know, anyone in the backcountry or a more limited resource environment. And you do have to get creative. And so like, you know, whereas if you were in a hospital, you can just grab a pre-made splint and put it on someone. We may not have that. A lot of the times it's costly for a camp to have those kinds of things. So, you know, what would you do? Like you splint with sticks and ace wrap, or like, you know, splint with sticks and an old t-shirt or a bandana or something. That's just a very, very small example, but just kind of getting outside. It teaches you how to shift from being a nurse in a high resource environment to not. So I think it's at the minimum. So now I have my wilderness first responder, or so there's WFA, the wilderness first aid, and there's WFR, the wilderness first responder. Mine is specifically for medical professionals, so it kind of teaches you at a little bit higher level than it would for someone who's getting it for more recreational reasons. But yeah, so that's at the very least the wilderness first aid. But the best would be the wilderness first responder. That
Oh,
goes into a much more detailed,
right.
higher level of thinking. Mhm.
And where do you get that from?
Yeah, so there are many many companies who do it. The one that I've done my courses with since forever, I've renewed my woofer 3 times now, and you have to renew it every 2 years. So I've had it for a while. So I always go through Knowles, which I think that is their like main name now. They used to go by the National Outdoor Leadership School. But I think they switched officially to just NOLS, Knowles. And they, in my opinion, are like the top of the game with wilderness medicine. There are other smaller companies like Solo Southeast, I think is one. And then Landmark, actually no, Landmark Learning here in North Carolina, they I think their instructors are through Knowles. So my preference is Knowles. I've had a great experience with them. But there are a lot of smaller little companies out there who do it as well. So and the price point is very different. Knowles is costly, but in my opinion is 100% worth it. I think the depth and the resources they give you is top notch compared to others, but yeah.
Okay. And then how many years experience do you think you need as a nurse to actually go into it? Like if you were a new nurse, could you jump right in, or do you think you should have a little bit of experience?
Yeah, this is a tough one because I think, especially recently, I feel like I've seen a lot of newer nurses and new grad nurses wanting to get into camp nursing, um, which I think is great. But for those, I would suggest that if you are going to do camp nursing as a new grad nurse, that you are working alongside with an experienced nurse. And that is because it takes a lot of nurse judgment to work in these kinds of environments. You are usually the only medical professional taking care of 300 plus kids, or even more, bigger camps, And so like, or for my camp, for example, that's 300, that's including campers plus staff, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm so sorry, my phone keeps going off. And so yeah, so 300 plus kids, or campers and staff. And so that's a lot of pressure. It's a lot. You have to be able to confidently make decisions for a camper and, and a staff member, and be that guidance for the directors as well. To make those medical decisions. And I think that someone like a new grad isn't, in my opinion, may not have that level of thinking yet. And so at the very least, I think get through that first year of being a new grad nurse and then consider camp nursing. Unless, like I said, you're working alongside with an experienced nurse. Mhm.
Okay. So that'd be like a good way to get started too, is like if you knew you're going to a camp that had somebody that had the experience, then you could be kind of mentored and you weren't like all on your own, right?
Right, that's correct. Yeah. Um, right now we actually have, I know a lot of camps hire nursing assistants. So like if you're a new grad nurse, or if you're someone in nursing school who is interested in eventually wanting to do camp nursing,
Yeah.
you could, apply to some camps as like a health center assistant.
Aid or
Um,
assistant. Oh, yeah.
yeah, and so that could give you a lot of experience. And in that case, if you have several summers with that experience under your belt, then in that case, I would,
Yeah.
I would, I would say that, even as a new grad nurse, you might be a little bit more experienced compared to someone just going
Yeah.
straight into it.
Well, that'd be awesome. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, thank you very much. This was a very eye-opening, and just what I like about it is that nursing isn't always what you think it is. Nursing
Mhm.
can be more what you want. And one of the things that we're trying to reveal on this podcast is that nursing can be what you want it to be, and you can find passion in what you like to do. We don't have to sit in the typical models of like, you have to spend years like on med surge or whatever. You started out in pediatrics, she said. I mean, I was crazy and told Allison she couldn't start in pediatrics. And so, it's just should be evolving, and we should actually keep in mind that, we need to take care of our nurses and make sure that they're being, taught the things they need to be taught, and that they have options instead of pigeonholing everybody into the typical nursing job. And given that it's Nurses Week, we just thought we should bring some light to some different non-traditional nursing jobs.
Yes. Yeah.
Where can you find jobs? Like if somebody was interested in listening, so two questions.
Yeah.
One, where would be the best place to find jobs?
Mhm.
And two, what resources would you offer people
Yes.
for looking?
Okay. So this is probably the most common question I get when people ask me, about camp nursing. The first thing is like, how do I find a job like that? Because it is unique. And so I have 3 places, well, kind of 4. Number 1 is the Association of Camp Health, or the Alliance of Camp Health. I'm sorry, the ACH, Alliance of Camp Health. They are specifically an organization that deals with camp health. And so it used to be just for nurses, and now they've expanded to provide resources for all types of healthcare workers, and mental health care workers. And so they have a job board on their website, and that camps submit to them to post these jobs. And so it's usually categorized, I think, by state. And that's a good place to start. So that's the Alliance of Camp Health. The second one is the American Camp Association. So that's the ACA. They are the basically governing body for summer camps in the United States. And so they also post healthcare jobs as well on there. Okay, then third would be the summer camp nurses or summer camp nursing. I think it might just be summer camp nurses Facebook group. It's a specific Facebook group. It's private, I believe. You just request to join, and there's directors who post jobs on there. But even with that, it's a great place to just network and maybe ask questions to other camp nurses. I learned a lot just being in that group and have found my current camp nurse job from there.
Oh.
And then lastly, Google Jobs, just like the, general Google Jobs. There's a lot of filtering you can do to kind of get what you're looking for. So keywords like summer camp nurse, outdoor nurse, pediatric camp nurse, like there's so many, keywords that you can put in there and adjust by state as well, which is important because it matters for your license. So
yeah.
So
you'd have to go to like a compact state if you like for your license there, but you couldn't necessarily venture out to a state where it wasn't a compact or you didn't have a license there, right?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it's great, looking at all these summer camps in like Hawaii and like, Maine.
Yeah,
And I wish, but you have to be within your compact or your state of license.
Okay.
And of course, if it's something that you're really committed to and a camp really wants you and they want to help you get, license in that state, then that's great. But it definitely just takes a little bit more work to do that.
Yeah. Okay.
And then your other question.
Oh, resources, but I think you kind of covered that with how to find a job. But yeah, if you have any other resources.
So resources in general. Like I said, the Alliance of Camp Health has an enormous glossary of things for camp nurses. I've been to a lot of their conferences and joined. They have free webinars and meetings and all of these things. And there's like an endless amount of resources on their website. You get more if you're a member, of course, but yeah, if any question I have about camp nursing, that is the first place I go because they are just a wealth of knowledge and resources for that. So yeah.
Well, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me. This is so exciting, and happy Nurses Week.
And they're in the Triangle area, which we will have you on another podcast. But what is something that they can join to connect with you?
Yes, we didn't quite get into this, but I have for the past since 2019, my best friend Morgan and I started a community here in the North Carolina in the Triangle area. So that's Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, and the surrounding areas. It's called Triangle Area Nurses. And if you are ever in the area, it's a great way to network. Since COVID, we kind of slowed down on meetups and things, but we have a private Facebook group that is very active. We get lots of posts a day. And it's again, another way to find jobs and to network with other nurses in our area. So if you're interested, I would love to see you there. That's also where I met Allie.
It's true.
Yes.
So we're just putting out resources for nurses, and we think it's great. You provided a lot of information. It was great meeting you on here, and we look forward to having you on another episode to talk more about the Triangle area nurses.
Yeah, I can't wait. Thank you both so much. Bye.
Our mission with this podcast is to create a community of nurses who want to change the field from the inside out. If this podcast resonated with you, make sure you like and subscribe wherever you are listening to this podcast. It helps you stay up to date with future podcast episodes, and it also makes sure we create a large community of nurses who want to change the field.